Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. Thanks for the warm welcome, and if you're joining us here at the headquarters and wherever you are, please be seated. Thank you very much. If you're joining us online, you can, on the top of the Facebook page, we do have the manual if you want to follow along. There's a drop-down menu. There should be, at this point, 5 manuals up there. We're in the 5th in the intermediate series of the Peaceful Solution program. It's called Responsibility. We are in, I believe we're in chapter 3. Am I right? Nobody said anything. Just checking you. Chapter 3? Who said no? It's chapter 3, though, right? Right, we're in Matters of the Heart on page 54, right? And remember the name of the, let's go back and we're going to look at the, I have a responsibility to myself. That's the name of the chapter. It's chapter 3. And we are on page 54. David left off there last time. If you pay close attention this evening, make sure if you have a pen or a pencil that you take notes. If you have a highlighter, make sure to highlight certain things we're gonna go over, because it's very important. I think we could say this class is probably going to be more for the teachers to get certain information in their mind to be able to pass on to the students. Because remember, this is a certification course. We're not actually teaching a junior high class right now, or we'd be doing it quite differently, okay? Of course, we try to keep it within the parameters of that age level, but there's things that teachers need to know to be able to teach adolescents these lessons. And a lot of it has to do with history even. You got to know the history of why are things the way they are, in our country, in our society. How did we get here? How did we get into this immoral situation, where you mentioned the word character and most people think you're talking about a cartoon show. They don't even know what character is for the most part. Okay, so we got to know how we got there. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight when we cover Matters of the Heart, because we need to know this journey that's brought us to this very strange idea about what love is. Okay? And the idea of love itself. We're gonna be covering that tonight. And David went over this, did a fantastic job last time. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna come right behind him, and I'm gonna kind of what they call back clean up a little bit and go over. I'm gonna fill in some parts that David didn't have time to do and give you a little history behind some of these things. So let's look at the top. First, let's go ahead and we're gonna go back to look at the step that we're in. We're going to go back to LP3D, and we're in step 7. So LP3, page E, step 7, where it says, explain to students they can also demonstrate a responsibility to themselves when they control their emotions. And remember, we had a whole chapter about control your emotions in the self-control unit, chapter 2 of the self-control unit. Although it's normal at their age to become interested in members of the opposite sex, premarital sex is a dangerous and irresponsible choice that results in many negative consequences. And that's what we're going to get into tonight, is like, how did we become such a promiscuous society where we actually think that it's normal to have premarital relations with people, okay? Whether we're teenagers or adults. And then it says assign pages 54 through 57 for homework. So we will be talking about some things that are a little bit, I know, You know, that three-letter word, sex, you know, nobody likes to, you know, touch on that too much. But, you know, we have to, okay, because we have to be realistic with the students that we're dealing with, okay? We're living in a very different world today than we were 70 years ago, okay? So let's go to page 54, and we'll start at the beginning here. And you can go ahead and put up the first visual for those that are watching online. I believe I have this. Yeah, there you go. Matters of the heart. Now it says, another important part of being responsible for yourself is learning how to keep your emotions under control. It probably seems like overnight you went from thinking that the opposite sex was gross and yucky to not so bad after all. Now remember, you're talking about adolescence, you know, where you remember the old tree fort, you know, where you had the sign that said no girls allowed. And I'm sure the girls had their signs, no boys, you know, because back then boys were yucky to us, you know, or to the girls, and the girls were yucky to the boys. Didn't want anything to do with them, you know. Well, mom was allowed, though. She could come, you know. If she came to the fort, she could come in. But no other girls were allowed, right? Okay, but it says, once again, you're faced with another irony of adolescence. Your body may have literally matured overnight, awakening feelings that you did not know existed. Yet, you are not old enough to marry the object of your affection, you know, that girl or that boy that you just think you have to have, you know, because your heart is telling you he's the right one or she's the right one, right? And you got to remember also, the object of your affection, when we talk about boys and girls today, it's not necessarily a boy looking at a girl thinking that that's the one for me. It could be a boy looking at another boy. It could be a girl looking at another girl. It could be a girl thinking or identifying as a boy, or a boy thinking or identifying as a girl. We're living in a completely, you know, this is what we're going to be touching on tonight. And we have to be educated to know, how did we get here to this place in 2024? So let's go ahead and look at the next visual. This is the continuing on page 54, where it says, so just what should I do with all these pent up emotions? And it's bolded for you already, and it's underlined already. Control them. Control them. Well, we're going to learn tonight that there's some people that told us we don't have to control them. And that we're doing this big experiment now, you know. We've got a big experiment going to see, you know, well, what occurs, what would be the problem if we don't control them and just go ahead and do what feels good or do what feels naturally. That's right. You have to control your emotions. Now, you're not probably going to hear that too much out there, you know, in society these days, because we do hear those same things I just said. You know, we've heard them since, you're going to find out tonight, the swinging 60s and the swinging 70s, you know. But, you know, we can actually even trace it back to the 50s. You know, that's where it started. But it really went into full gear in the 60s. So it says you have to control your emotions. Now underline this part right here and highlight it. You have an obligation and a responsibility to yourself and to the object of your affection to practice self-control. Okay, so you have an obligation, a moral obligation to yourself and that other person to keep your desire, your lust, because that's what it is. It's a desire. It's a lust. Okay, it's you're seeing something that you like. It's causing all kinds of, you know, thoughts and feelings to come over you. Okay, and you've been told that that's love, because you have this warm, fuzzy feeling, or you start feeling these urges that's love, okay? And that is not what love is, okay? That's the farthest thing from love. But we're gonna have to go over that tonight so we can see this a little clearer. But that word pent up, where it says, what do I do with all these pent up emotions? If you look at the definitions, you see it says not released. It means not released. Some of the synonyms of pent up means suppressed, checked, curbed, inhibited, held back, stifled, repressed, smothered, constrained, bridled, bottled up. Now, the peaceful solution is not telling you to bottle them up, not to bottle your emotions up. In fact, there's nothing wrong with you taking your discussing these things with the proper authorities. Like if you have feelings about somebody and you just think that that you'd like to get to know that person or whatever, there's nothing wrong with a boy or girl going to his mom or dad and talking to them about these things. In fact, if you're a young girl, I'm sure your mother could tell you all about what you need to know, okay, about these sorts of things, because they've already been through them, okay? And young men, young boys, you can go to your father and he can tell you all about these things. And I know in most families, that's who they're going to tend to go to. The boy is going to tend to go to the father, and the young lady is going to tend to go to her mother, because it's not really something that, I would feel comfortable as a father discussing with my daughter. And that's where moms come in, and vice versa. So you don't have to bottle them up. You can talk about it, okay, and just and talk about your feelings and talk about and hopefully the peaceful solution would be involved in this discussion, because if you're a peaceful solution student, then you should be able to take the peaceful solution and apply it to that person's thoughts, feelings. Tell them about the consequences that could come if you don't control those urges, and tell them about the rewards that'll come if you do. Okay. Now most families don't have that. They don't have that training, but they do have some sort of idea. Some families do try their best to keep their sons and daughters from making bad choices when it comes to sexual relations before they're married, before these young people get old enough to marry. I know I've had a lot of parents sent by CPS to our program that, they tried so hard to keep their children from engaging in these kind of activities. I remember one time a young girl, a mother came because she had grabbed her daughter by the arm to try to keep her from going out the door to go out with this boy. Okay. She forbid her from going. In fact, first of all, the girl shouldn't have been leaving her house, because remember, we learned in the peaceful solution that a child doesn't have the right just to leave the house without asking the parents' permission. So when the girl went to go out the door, the mother was so fearful for her life and for her safety and her well-being that she grabbed her by the arm. Well, the next day, she went to school with a bruise on her arm, and the school nurse was asking, where'd you get that bruise? And next thing you know, CPS is involved. And the mother was really only trying to protect her daughter, okay? But that's the kind of situation you can find yourself in society these days, okay? And, we shouldn't bring harm to somebody to keep them from doing something. But, that mother didn't mean to cause her daughter any kind of physical harm when she just grabbed her by the arm and tried to keep her from going outside. And she took a parenting class, and she learned the appropriate way to deal with those things in the future. Okay, so how did we get here? Let's go ahead and put up the next visual, because we got to talk about, let's look at this first, and then we'll get into what's called the sexual revolution in the 60s. It says, the society we live in does not make this easy to do. In other words, this society we live in does not make it easy to practice self-control. Okay? We live in a society where sex is part of almost every TV show, song, commercial, movie, magazine, and music video. Movie stars and singers all act sexy, and they're known, in addition to their talent, for their sex appeal. Clothing is designed to attract the opposite sex. Even perfumes and colognes have been manufactured to increase sex appeal. With sex so much a part of your daily lives, you get the impression that everybody else is doing it, and if you're not, you're some kind of weirdo, you're some kind of misfit. You don't belong, you know. You're like, you see in that visual there, you know, everybody else is going one way, and you feel like you're totally separate from them because you're not doing what they do. You know what? That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be a misfit when it comes to premarital sex. Unless you just want to fit in. And where do you fit in? At the doctor's office, learning you got chlamydia or syphilis or herpes or AIDS or some other of the 122 STDs I didn't mention? Or where do you fit in? You know, is it in a coffin 6 feet under the ground? You know, just because you don't want to go along with the crowd that's getting diseases, suffering miserable lives, because, you know, these STDs aren't just a nuisance, you know. It's horrible to have to live with something like that, I'm sure. Okay? And, you know, a lot of people, they go about their normal lives, you know, living with them, you know, but when they have outbreaks, it's pretty bad. It's pretty nasty. It's pretty scary. It's humiliating. Okay, and I'm sure at that point they're thinking, man, I would have never done what I did. Okay, but what we're trying to instill in our students is you don't have to have regrets. If you control your emotions in the beginning, you won't have to look back with the regrets that we have as adults now. You know, and that's what we need to try to impress upon the young people. Okay, let's go ahead and put up the next visual, because we want to start talking a little bit here about what was called the sexual revolution. And I'm going to be reading quite a bit about this. I'm going to be taking excerpts from Wikipedia about what's called the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution, also known as the sexual liberation, was a social movement that challenged traditional codes of behavior related to sexuality and interpersonal relationships throughout the developed Western world from the 1960s to the 1970s. You know, it's kind of funny. They call it the developed Western world, and then they call the other countries the underdeveloped countries. You know, what's funny about that is what do they mean by developed? Because I've gone to some of those underdeveloped countries, and their morals are much more developed than ours ever thought of being. So if they're thinking about just like construction and how they build houses and buildings, that's could be all they're talking about, because a lot of the character in other countries quite surpasses Western culture. The morals. They still have some morals in a lot of countries that the West does not have, okay? Or that the West at one time had, but has since lost, okay? It's gone completely downhill. But anyway, let me continue reading. Sexual liberation. That word liberation means freedom, okay? Freedom. Sexual liberation included an increased acceptance of sex outside of traditional heterosexual monogamous relationships, primarily marriage. So monogamous meaning, you know, one-on-one. Heterosexual meaning boy with boy, or boy with girl, girl with boy, or, you know, man with woman. The normalization of contraception and the pill, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex, homosexuality, alternative forms of sexuality, and the legalization of abortion all followed. This is This is their big experiment. I'm going to show you some of the players behind their big experiment of not inhibiting those pent-up emotions. In other words, just let it all hang out, they said. You know? And after all, who wrote the rules anyway? You know, who told us we can't, you know, do whatever we want to do with whoever we want to do it anyway? Well, they quickly found out. It didn't take them very long to find out the consequences of this kind of behavior, this liberation that they were practicing here. Let's go to the next slide. And, you know, by the way, I look at some of the faces in the crowd, and I know a lot of you know this because a lot of you lived through this, okay? I mean, I was born in 62, so I'm quite familiar with this. And some of you are even a little older than I am, or at least my age, so I know you know this. But we gotta look a little deeper into it. Sexual revolution, the article on Wikipedia under the subtitle Formation. Indicators of non-traditional sexual behavior. Examples are gonorrhea incidents, births out of wedlock, and births to teenagers began to rise dramatically in the late 1950s. Okay, so I'm sure some of you used to watch Happy Days, you know, where Fonzie and who was that, Howie or whatever his name, Howard, Ron Howard, I don't remember the guy's name, Howie or something. But, you know, they were into the dating, okay? And that was set in the 50s. You know, in the 50s, you know, before that, they had the chaperones, you know, where, you know, parents would go out. If the boy and the girl wanted to go to a movie together or something, you know, mom and dad would be in the next car, you know, right there within eye shot, you know, so they could keep their eyes so there was no hanky-panky going on, making sure the windows weren't steaming up or anything, right? So the parents, they were under supervision of the parents, okay? And that was normal. So it wasn't anything wrong with there wasn't anything wrong with the two getting to know each other, but not getting to know each other in the way that Hollywood teaches you to get to know each other today. So they had chaperones, but, you know, a little later on, they started this dating thing where, you know, the boy would take the girl out, mom and dad weren't anywhere around. And that's what this is talking about here. When the late 1950s, you started seeing gonorrhea increases. You started seeing births out of wedlock and births to teenagers at that time. So it says it brought about profound shifts in attitudes towards women's sexuality, homosexuality, premarital sexuality, and the freedom of sexual expression. The sexual revolution was initiated by those who shared a belief in the detrimental impact of sexual repression. Get this. Remember what we just read about pent-up emotions? Controlling those emotions, controlling our urges? What they're saying is there was those who had a shared belief in the detrimental impact of sexual repression. In other words, it's hurting people to make them control themselves. They shouldn't have to control themselves. They should be able to do whatever they want. You know? It says, a view that had previously been argued by Wilhelm Reich, Lawrence, Sigmund Freud, and the Semelius movement. The counterculture. Now, the counterculture was the culture that opposed normal culture. You know, they wanted to go the other way, counterclockwise. In other words, they didn't want to go with the norms of society. They wanted to go the counter way. They wanted to go counterclockwise and just do whatever they wanted to do and be liberated. The counterculture, remember the hippies? The hippie movement was a great example. The counterculture wanted to explore the body and mind and free the personal self from the moral and legal sexual confines of modern America, as well as from the 1940s to 1950s, morals in general. In other words, they didn't want any part of morals or what they knew of morals. They wanted no part of it. The sexual revolution of the 1960s grew from a conviction that sexual desire should be celebrated as a normal part of life and not repressed by family, industrialized sexual morality, religion, and the state. In other words, you shouldn't let your religion or the state tell you what to do. Don't let the authorities tell you what's right for you. You do what you want to do. Just if it feels good, do it. Right? Okay, so this was the idea. Okay, let's go ahead and put up the next visual. Now, from the same article on the sexual revolution, this is subtitled Free Love. Free love is a social movement that accepts all forms of love. Now, remember, they're using this term love, okay? So let's we're going to discuss that a little later, but right now, for the sake of just our time we have, we'll go ahead and we'll go with their definition of what love is. Free love is a social movement that accepts all forms of love. The movement's initial goal was to separate the state from sexual matters such as marriage, birth control, and adultery. It stated that such issues were the concern of the people involved and no one else. In other words, what two adults are doing or two boys and girls are doing is none of your business. It's between those two. Says, or two men or two women. Didn't matter. They were just saying it was just their business. Free love continued in different forms throughout the 1970s and into the early 1980s. But its more assertive manifestations faced increased pushback in the mid-1980s when the public first became aware of AIDS, a deadly sexually transmitted disease. Now, get that. You should really underline and underscore that in your brain right now. Do you see what that led to? Right away. You see what that led to? AIDS. And guess what? It scared them all to death. It scared them all to death because they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Can you put that visual back up, please? It scared them all to death because now they saw, wait a minute, this kind of stuff we're doing, people can die from this. I remember in the mid-1980s, I believe it was Rock Hudson. He was like the most famous guy that got AIDS at the time, was Rock Hudson. And, he was a manly man, I used to watch him on McMillan and Wife. He had a wife. He was McMillan and he had a wife. So, you always thought that Rock Hudson, he was a man, he was a manly man. He liked women. No, turned out he didn't like women. He probably liked them, but he didn't prefer them when it came to sex. And he died because he engaged in, and this is what the Supreme Court's not going to tell you. In 2015, on June 26, 2015, the United States Supreme Court legalized this sort of behavior. Now, they didn't discuss what we're discussing right now. Rock Hudson actually died from HIV, which went into full-blown AIDS. Okay? He actually died. He lost his life. Okay? And millions of other people have lost their lives to these deadly sexually transmitted diseases that engaged in the same behavior as Rock Hudson, including another very popular entertainer, Freddie Mercury, who used to sing for a group called Queen. He died of AIDS. Okay? In fact, they made a big old movie about him and glorified the guy. But you know what they didn't do in that movie? They had a golden opportunity to do something in that movie that they didn't do. They could have taught the people how dangerous it is to engage in that sort of conduct and what it brings to the people that engage in that conduct. The same thing that Supreme Court didn't do. They didn't discuss the moral aspect of what, they didn't show both sides of the coin. They just said, well, we believe that, the Constitution gives, a boy and a boy and a girl a right to do whatever they want to do and so on and so forth. And, You know, they should be able to marry who they want. What they didn't discuss was the scientific part of it where, well, but if they do this, they can die from this. You follow? They didn't discuss that. They didn't discuss the moral, you know, the consequences that are coming from this kind of behavior, okay? And that's not fair. That's not fair to people not to be shown both sides of the coin. And that's why you are obligated to teach your students both sides of the coin. Now, if, you know, don't get me wrong, I've had students that walked in, I've had men walk in my class with fingernails, with long fingernails and a purse, and identifying as a girl, calling themselves girl names. I've had them sit with me in class, and I taught them just like I taught everybody else. Okay? I didn't belittle them. I didn't put them down. I just treated them like anybody else, like we all do in the Peaceful Solution. We respect everybody. Okay? I'm not saying we disrespect anybody like that. What I'm saying is we have to teach what's right. We have to teach what's wrong. Okay? And people have to make choices. But we have to inform them. Okay? We have to inform them of the rewards and the consequences of the behavior that people are choosing to do. And this article on Wikipedia is really a great thing because it shows that, you know, it wasn't always something that was normal. None of this behavior was normal. And I'm not just talking about homosexuality right now. I'm talking about premarital sex, adultery, all these other things that have just exploded since this big experiment they've been conducting. Let's go back to the next visual here. So did I read the rest of Free Love? I did. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So the next part of this article on the sexual revolution is called non-marital sex, premarital sex. There you see John and Yoko there. Remember, I think they had some hotel room there in New York, and the press, you know, the press was there, and at least here they got their clothes on. I think in the one I saw years and years ago, they didn't have any clothes on, but they were just sitting there, you know, talking with no clothes on to the press. The press was taking pictures and talking to John and Yoko as they sat in their bed. A private area, right? But they made it look like, well, it's normal to go to somebody's hotel room, you know, and talk to two people who are fornicating or, you know, with each other. Because remember, they weren't married either. So they were having non-marital relations. Okay? So it says premarital sex, heavily stigmatized for some time, became more widely accepted. The increased availability of birth control and the legalization of abortion in some places helped reduce the chance that premarital sex would result in unwanted children. In other words, hey, since they have the pill and since I can go get an abortion, nobody has to know. Nobody has to know that I messed around with somebody. This is what it caused. This is what it caused. And this isn't the worst of it. It says, by the mid-1970s, the majority of newly married American couples had experienced sex before marriage. By 1971, more than 75% of Americans thought that premarital sex was acceptable. Do you see how quickly this took place? We're in the 40s, and even into the 50s, people would have thought, no, you don't do that. You know, that's not something that we do. But now in the 1970s and the early 70s, 75% of Americans thought that that was normal. This is how quickly the morals deteriorated. It says, and that says that was a threefold increase from the 1950s. And it said Americans were becoming less and less interested in getting married and settling down, and as well less interested in monogamous relationships. In other words, they wanted to go explore with all kinds of different people. In 1971, 35% of the country said they thought marriage was obsolete. The idea of marriage being outdated came from the development of casual sex between Americans. With the development of the birth control pill and the legalization of abortion in 1973, there was little threat of unwanted children out of wedlock. Also, during this time, every known sexually transmitted disease was readily treatable. It was treatable. Underline that in your mind. Treatable. Not curable, treatable. In other words, you could go to the VD clinic, and I remember when I was young, they had VD clinics all over Anchorage, Alaska, man. They were usually in the seedy parts of town, you know. They had the VD clinic where you could go in and get your shot or your pill for whatever STD you had. Back then, it was mainly gonorrhea, the clap, herpes, etc. But you could go in and you could get treated for that STD. And then you could go right back out and just keep, I remember that commercial. I'll never forget this commercial. I wanted to call CNN and ask them what in the world are y'all thinking? But I saw it on CNN. It was a woman. She's out dancing, partying, and it said, she says, I haven't let herpes stop me one bit. She's out there on the dance floor, dancing with some guy that probably doesn't have no clue that this woman's got herpes, right? And she's getting ready to kiss him, I'm sure, and spread it to him, right? But then I guess she can tell him about this stuff she's taking. That's treating her herpes because she can't be cured of it. You can't be cured of any of these. They have no cure. Did you ever notice that? They have no cure for these behaviors. None. There's no cure for any of these behaviors. These deviant sexual behaviors, there's no cure for any of them. Now, they thought they had syphilis beat, back, I think, in the 50s. They came up with, what was that? What's that? Penicillin. Yeah, they thought that penicillin was going to kill that stuff. Well, all it did is repressed it. It suppressed it to where, it hid in the body. These microorganisms are very clever, They're living organisms. They're alive. So they know if there's a threat, you know what they do? They hide. So if something comes in the body, if the doctor gives you a shot of something like penicillin, okay, that very intelligent syphilis can see it coming and duck and cover. Kind of like they taught us to do in the 50s, duck and cover. It can duck and cover and it can hide. Okay? And then they started overusing this stuff, and next thing you know, none of it was even working. None of it was even affecting these STDs at all. And now you have super gonorrhea where there's nothing that'll touch it. Okay? So, in all of their, what the most amazing part of this whole thing is? You got all these laboratories everywhere. They're trying to find a cure. They're doing everything they can to find a cure for cancer. Yes, cancer is an STD. Yes, cancer is an STD, okay? All right? They're trying to find all these cures for all their bad behavior. They're trying to find a cure for it. And they're spending billions and billions of dollars. And, I don't even know if they're doing that Jerry Lewis telethon anymore. But they used to, every year, the cure is right around the corner. Just give us $1 billion more. We're going to find the cure. We're going to beat this thing in our lifetime, Well, how many lifetimes ago was that? And they're no closer today than they were. But you know what the cure is? It's right in front of you. It's right in front of us. It's right here. It's called prevention. If we taught people what we're learning right now about controlling those and, controlling those emotions that you think, that's love, that you think is love, what's really lust and desire, if you could control that, you wouldn't have these regrets. You wouldn't have these diseases. You wouldn't want the unwanted baby that now you want to murder under the guise of taking it to the doctor who's got a license to murder. And yes, I called it murder because that's what it is. You're taking the life of another human being. And I don't want to hear your silly arguments about, oh, well, it's not born yet, so it's not really a person. Really? Tell that to the district attorney that charged the man for punching the woman in the stomach and she had an abortion. And he charged her with murder because he killed the baby. The baby wasn't alive then, was it? So don't come with your silly arguments. Why don't you just learn that these things are treatable? These things don't have to be. And if we're partaking in it, if we're participating in it, we're actually on the wrong side of history. And we're actually on the immoral side of history. Let's go to the next, put that visual back up. Let me see if I've finished with it. Okay, yeah, I got that. Okay, all right. So let's go to the next slide. I told you there's a little bit in here about this because I want us to understand where all this came from. Now, here's the next part. The sexual revolution, it says teenagers now, get this, because of this sexual revolution, teenagers assumed their right to a sexual life with whoever they pleased. And bathers fought to be topless at nude at beaches. Hey, I should be able to go to the beach and take off my bra or take off my pants or whatever I want because, hey, I can do whatever I want. Okay? But notice, teenagers assumed their right to a sexual life with whoever they wanted. And now, since then, that's what they think. This is what they've been taught. So is it the teenagers' fault? Yes or no? No. It's because this is what society has taught them. This is what the counterculture has decided to put in the minds of the children through the media, through the music, through the movies, through the video games, through the songs, etc. Let's go to the next slide. Now, let's come back to earth here now, and let's learn a little bit about love from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program so we can counter the counterculture. Right? We got to set the counterculture straight. We got to straighten them back out here and give them a little information about what love actually is. It says positive, and this is page 32 of the self-control unit. Remember I told you we went over in chapter 2 about emotions. Positive emotion is the energy that fuels our moral growth and development. Notice, moral growth. Moral. The one that they said, oh, we don't need those morals. We don't need that. We don't need to be repressing our feelings and our urges. We need to do whatever we want. Positive emotion can improve the way you perceive yourself and your interactions. They make life enjoyable. There's nothing wrong. The author of The Peaceful Solution would tell you, there's nothing wrong with sexual desire for your wife or your husband. It's totally normal. It's totally okay. In fact, you should desire your wife or your husband. You should. Now, it says positive emotion, under positive emotion on page 32, the word love, or the love. It says love, it means feeling a strong concern for someone or something arising out of lust. Nobody caught me. I didn't hear anybody. Am I wrong or right? I'm wrong. I got to read it again? Okay, man, I better, because I've been trained by the counterculture. I thought I saw something else. Let me see. Oh, it says love is feeling a strong concern for someone or something arising out of care. Care. Do you see anything about sex there? Is there anything about sex there? Is there any insinuation of anything sexual there? In the word love there? I don't see anything. But you know where we got those ideas about love, right? Yeah, I'll tell you where it started. It didn't start with the movies. When I was young, it didn't start with the movies. It started in school. It started in kindergarten when I was told to give that little girl over there that Valentine card. And that Valentine candy that said, I love you. Be my Valentine. You're hot. You're cute. And you know what that led to? It led to me and Mary. That was my girlfriend's name. When I was 6 years old, it led to me and Mary going to Mary's house after school every day and holding hands and kissing and watching cartoons after school. With no parents around. That's what it led to. And I was only 6. Because I was encouraged to give that little girl, and I'm not joking about this, I was encouraged to give the girls Valentine's cards and candy. That's where it started. And we just had a Valentine's Day, didn't we? A couple days ago. We're still celebrating that stuff? Are they still celebrating that? The candy makers are getting rich, I'm sure. Okay, let's put that back up. And then, like giving somebody the card, that said, I really, 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 really love you, The more you could say I love you, or the more times you said I really, 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 that meant you really love that person, right? If you could say it that many times, the girl would think, man, wow, look how much he loves me. He said it 10 times. He wrote it 10 times that he loved me. That other guy only did it 5. So he must really love me more than that guy. No. He wants to have sex with you more than that other guy. So he wrote it more times because he's more desperate. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. If you think that's love because some guy's writing on a piece of paper, I love you, texting you, I love you or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. All it's telling you is I desire you. I want you. I think it was called hunting when I was younger. They're out. It's the thrill of the chase. That's what they said in the song. It's the thrill of the chase. Men chasing women, and then once they get what they want, they hang that trophy up on the wall. They got all their trophies, and then the girl is left wondering. I thought he loved me. What's going on? What's wrong with me? Well, what's wrong with us is we weren't trained that that's not love, okay? We're being brainwashed. I don't even call it brainwashed. If we were being brainwashed, we'd be here, getting our little brains scrubbed from this filth we've been taught by our society, this sexual revolution we've been taught here. Okay, let's go ahead and put that back up. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And page 33 of that same self-control book says, love can be one of the most difficult emotions to explain. Many people misunderstand love because of the way it's portrayed in movies, TV shows, and romance novels. An intense affection for another is one popular explanation. Attraction based on sexual desire is another. So now they're telling you even, if a boy looks at a boy and he's sexually attracted to that person, or if a man looks at a man, or a girl looks at a girl, or a woman looks at a woman, and they're sexually attracted to them, that's love. And that we shouldn't interfere with that. We shouldn't interfere with that, Well, I'm going to interfere with it. Because I'm telling you that's not love. That's called lust and desire. They lied to you. Okay? Not that they actually lied to you, but they were lied to, so they continually spreading this misinformation about what love is. And now they perpetuated it through the media, because they have control of the media. They got control of the movies, they got control of the music, and all the singers have been brought up thinking the same thing. So now they're talking about love like, love at first sight, right? As soon as I saw that girl, or as soon as that boy, or as soon as that woman saw that man, whoa, he was so hot. I had to have him. And I had to have him tonight. Because if I didn't have it tonight, somebody else might get it. Well, I guarantee if they gave it to you tonight, they already gave it to somebody else. And what you're getting is seconds, thirds, fourths. And you remember what we learned about STDs? It's the equivalent of sleeping with all the other people that other person just slept, that they already slept with in their past. If you sleep with somebody that's been sleeping with other people, you're taking in all those things that those other people left behind. I know that sounds nasty, but that's how it is. It's called genetics. And it's called biology. It's called science. Go look it up. They'll tell you the same thing. So they got all these ideas from popular culture. And remember, it was counterculture. Okay? This wasn't always this way. In fact, I remember the author of The Peaceful Solution telling us something about people getting tarred and feathered back in the old days. If some boy came or some man came into town and tried to hit on some other man's wife, which they do freely now, you know, they don't care if you got a ring on or something. They don't even look for that, you know. Even if they see it, they don't care. You know, they would tar and feather such a person and tell them, don't ever come back to this town. Or if a woman was promiscuous and she came to town and, you know, she was wearing short shorts or whatever she was doing, they would tell her the same thing. Hey, you need to go change your clothes, get in some proper clothing. They would correct you, you know, and sometimes it takes a village, you know, but they would say something about it. Okay. And that person normally would, I mean, you know, have you ever heard of positive peer pressure? You ever heard of positive peer pressure? Peer pressure can be positive, you know. You can actually sway people to go the right way. I'm not talking about force, but I'm talking about just letting them know, hey, that's not normal. You know, we don't do that here. We don't do that in these neck of the woods. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So on page 54, I'm continuing on page 54 of the responsibility unit. It says the problem is that with so much emphasis on sex, there's very little emphasis placed on the consequences of having sex before marriage. There are no sitcoms depicting young women and men getting diagnosed with herpes or syphilis. You know, there's no show called Syphilis in the City, right? There's no show like that. You know, you got Sex in the City, showing all these girls out messing around with men, some of them even married, out messing around with men, doing things in elevators, back seats of cars, etc., making it look normal to just go out and be with whoever I want, not showing any consequences, unwanted pregnancies, abortions, STDs, wrecked marriages, murder, stalking, and other things that come from this kind of stuff, assaults. They don't show any of that. For the most part, they only show the fun they're having, right? Like that girl that was out dancing. I'm not letting anything stop me. I got herpes, but I'm taking this pill right here so I can just keep on doing it. You don't have a show called Desperate Infected Housewives, right? You don't have a show like that. We don't have any sitcoms named that, right? That would be kind of a bummer. Nobody would want to watch that, would they? We wouldn't want to see what really takes place. That's what I like about Mexican media. Mexican media. If you go to Mexico and they have a car wreck in Mexico, or there's a murder in Mexico, you know what they show? They show it all. They show the blood, the guts. They show the mangled car. They show it all. They don't hide anything. In America, you read the newspaper and it talks about these things, but it's just in print, and you don't really see the horror of what you're actually reading about. So it doesn't have the same impact. You know, it's like reading 30 people killed in market after man explodes bomb, you know. You don't see the body parts laying everywhere. You don't see the blood and guts, you know. You don't see the shrapnel, you know, coming out of people's skulls. And you don't see any of that. All you read is in print. So it doesn't have that impact. Okay, let's go ahead and put up that slide again. So it says, There are no sitcoms depicting young women and men getting diagnosed with herpes or syphilis, no music videos about how life changes for the millions of young men and women who are diagnosed HIV positive. There's no action-packed movies of their suffering and daily struggles with a disease that will ultimately take their lives. Oh? A disease that will ultimately take their lives? I thought that was love. I thought that was love. Wasn't that love? Aren't they just loving each other? Isn't that what the Supreme Court said? They have the right to marry. Yeah, what was that sign they were carrying outside the Supreme Court? One love, or love is love. You know, didn't that what it said? Love is love, one love. You know, all these twisted, immoral, perverted ideas that they put into our brains since we were very, very young. So I'm not blaming anybody. I'm telling you, this is a huge experiment. And I'm also telling you, the experiment has failed. The experiment has failed because millions and millions and millions of babies have been slaughtered by doctors who took an oath to save lives. Now, if you're a doctor and you're participating in this and you're watching this program, turn to the peaceful solution. Start educating these young women that come to the clinics. If you work for Planned Parenthood, crack this book open. Start looking in it. Put some pamphlets out there at Planned Parenthood and start planning parenthood and stop planning murder. Because that's actually what's taking place. That's like calling a crack house 7-Eleven. Right? They're not planning parenthood. They're planning to murder babies. And there's much money to be made in this. Remember what we talked about? What's the main factor of all of these deviant behaviors? Money making. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Continuing to read on page 54, what you hear about in songs and see on videos, TV and movies, is the passion without the consequences, the highs without the lows. Don't let that fool you. Promiscuous sex leads to suffering and death. Now, what do you want me to do? You want me to sound flowery up here? This is killing people. This is killing millions of people. And they're showing it on the Super Bowl. They're showing it on the Grammy Awards. They're showing it on all the songs. They're making out like all this is normal behavior, and it's killing people. People's lives are being destroyed left and right. Look at that fetus. Now, I'm sure if that fetus had their choice, they'd be pro-choice, right? Yeah. Yeah, they'd want to live. But no, who's speaking for that baby? You know, who slaughtered that little baby right there? Because that's what it is. It's slaughtering children. You're murdering, slaying children when you do these things. Now, you can stop doing it, and you can turn to the peaceful solution and start relearning what the counterculture decided you didn't have to repress. Now, let's go to the last slide. I think I have one more. Okay, it says, with sex literally everywhere and none of its consequences broadcast with equal fervor, it's even more important to become responsible and learn now how to control your feelings before you make a decision you will regret. Using self-control will help you avoid getting into sexual situations that you're not ready for, right? You wouldn't be sitting there watching that TV show on the couch with the opposite sex like I did when I was 6 without any supervision if you learned how to control those feelings. You would already know, well, that's going to lead to something that I'm going to regret if I do that. You would know that. You wouldn't put yourself in situations like that because you had been taught the peaceful solution. You'd be learning the rewards that even come for not doing that. You would realize that I could be disease free. I won't have to worry about this, and I won't have to worry about that, and I won't have to worry about any of those things that other people are suffering if I just do what the peaceful solution tells me to do. Okay, it's really that simple. Okay, let's go to that. I think there is one more slide. So, remember they called it free love? Free love? Really? Is it free? Because it says an estimated 19 million new cases of STDs occur every year in the U.S. with a price tag of $12 to $20 billion, including HIV in lifetime direct medical costs, and that's in 2006 U.S. dollars. Also, the consequences of Roe versus Wade, you see there's over 63,459,781 murders of babies since 1973. Free love? And I'm only scratching the surface. No, we need to relearn love. So I'm out of time tonight, but we're going to continue this where we left off here in the next class. We're going to continue on these same lines. We're going to delve a little deeper into it. Okay, on 2/21, February 21st, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. I hope you'll join us. I'm not angry at anybody about this. What I'm trying to do is this is a very serious subject, and I want everyone to see what this counterculture has done so we can actually turn this thing back around and get this society back on track. So it's been a great class. We'll see you next time.